If you want it, you can have it. All you gotta do is just reach out and grab it. If you want it, you can have it. All you got to do is just reach right out and grab it. Step on up. Step into your power. Step on up. Step into your power, child. Step on up. Step into your power. Step on up. Step into your power, child. Now listen to me. All you need, you already own. It was given to you.
Well, Guy, what do you think of that warm-up there? What do you think?
Step into your power. The power of free speech, the power of the First Amendment, the power of hope. Absolutely. Bring it on. That is great. Who sang that song? I've never heard that before.
Ray LaMontagne? I don't know if I said that right.
LaMontagne.
Anybody out there that maybe knows it? It's a great song. I heard it on... what is it? Used to be 101 The One Classic Hits Vermont the other day, and I said, man, I got to use that song at some point. So,
way to go, Ray.
Yeah, it was fun.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the 19th episode of VDC's TV's Friday at 4.
Wow.
Can you believe it, Paul?
I cannot believe that.
19 years we've been... 19... Whoa!
19 years.
19 weeks we've been doing this. Fantastic. Yeah. So... you may be noticing something over my shoulder here, my right shoulder, or you'd be your left, I suppose, looking at it. So in 2 weeks, Vermont will celebrate the Battle of Bennington Day, the 247th celebration of the Battle of Bennington. That right there is known as the Bennington Battle Flag. And the Creemee Cast studio is getting a jump on the celebration of Battle of Bennington Day by hanging a Bennington Battle Flag. And there's a reason for that. More than just, hey, look what we did in the Revolutionary War. See, the Battle of Bennington was fought by a bunch of Green Mountain boys, some militia, some New Hampshire guys who, led by a gentleman named John Stark, who said something like "Victory, boys," or "Tonight, Molly Stark sleeps a widow." So they were determined. They'd just gotten their butts kicked at the Battle of Hubbardton, the little-known Battle of Hubbardton, of which I think tomorrow there's going to be some sort of celebration of that or whatever. And they just been, really just rolled over by the British and the Hessians. But they rallied. They stood united, and they stood strong, and they beat back a very professional group of soldiers. And that victory then led to the epic, the world-important battle of the destruction of the British Army at the Battle of Saratoga, just a few, weeks later. And when you look in the sort of the list of the maybe 10 most important battles in terms of strategic importance in the history of the world, Battle of Saratoga is right there.
That's right.
And therefore, the Battle of Bennington. So, but why we have it up here, and the reason they call it this is Millard Fillmore's great-great-grandfather or whatever, some relative of Millard Fillmore, apparently had that flag, fought with it on the battlefield, brought it home, and henceforth the Fillmore family called it the Bennington Battle Flag, and was later bestowed to the Bennington Museum. So it has we're not terribly sure exactly what it did at the battle, but supposedly it was there. And the reason we have it up there, Paul, is it's what this show is all about, which is the intersection of Vermont and people in Vermont who care, people who fight for the right things with the greater national story, the greater international story.
That's right.
The reason we had General Michael Flynn on last week, right? Was because he's having, starting tomorrow at 3 o'clock, by the way, folks, 3 o'clock at Ignite Church, in Williston. He will be giving a live Zoom appearance. General Flynn's first Vermont appearance, as far as we know, his first live appearance, besides this interview last week with us.
That's right.
And that'll be at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And the movie begins at 4. The documentary movie Flynn begins at 4. So for those of you who are making plans to go to that, plan to show up at 3, because that is when the Zoom appearance is scheduled, according to the General's website. So that's an intersection of Vermont and the National. And we had an advisor to the Trump campaign on this week, on Tuesday. That was a great interview, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was too.
Yeah. So this is what we're about. Boy, Paul, what would you say? I know we're having a call in, probably just a few minutes, right?
Yeah, 4 minutes. Allison's going to call in.
Allison Deswithy will be calling in, and she will be talking about this huge story that broke this week. We went, Paul and I, just an hour or two ago, went around and around. What do we talk about this week? Oh, we can talk about, the flood.
Again.
Right, again. And what in the world is going on, and what's the state going to do to prevent more damage like this? We could talk about, let me see, the Palestinian activists are going to protest at a Vermont Kamala Harris fundraiser a week from tomorrow. We could talk about censorship on a Vermont radio station and Front Porch Forum that happened this week.
Tell us about that guy. What are you talking about?
Well, you'll just have to read about it in Vermont Daily Chronicle, Paul.
Okay.
As perhaps you should have already.
Hey, well, I did post that news today. I just didn't get a chance to read it.
Okay.
It's been a wild one, as you know.
I know. Has it ever?
Yeah.
Just today we published, because the state did it yesterday, all of the school property tax rates, town by town.
Wow.
So we looked up Berlin. This is what Berlin's going to be paying. You could look up Northfield. You can look up whatever town you live in, and you can find out on that spreadsheet, it's in today's paper, about the 8th story down. That's how crazy a news day it's been. But what we decided after all of this, that really the lead story is the Vermont Supreme Court ruled against 2 Vermont parents who sued their local school district, who without their permission administered the COVID-19 experimental drug, aka vaccine, to their child, to their 6-year-old child. The school went ahead and did it. Apparently they say it was a mistake, sort of an administrative mistake, but the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the school district. They said the school district has immunity, and the reason they gave was a 2005 federal law that says if there's an emergency, public health emergency, Big Pharma can do no wrong, legally speaking. You cannot sue them. Anyone administering the drug, anyone involved in the distribution of the drug, anyone having to do with these vaccines in a public health emergency is legally immune from actions taken, especially if it's like an oops, which apparently is what this one was.
Allison's calling in.
Oh, okay, good timing.
Oh, hello, Allison. Hold on 1 second. Can you hear us, Allison? Can you hear us? Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. How are you today, Allison? You're live on Friday at 4 with Guy Page and Paul Bean. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me, and happy Friday to you guys.
Thank you, Allison. Allison, for those of you who are not readers of the Chronicle, will recognize her name and today, she wrote a terrific story on the Vermont fuel dealers, for example, pushing back against the clean heat standard, saying, gee, if you want to put us out of business, this is a great way to do it. So she wrote on that today.
I can kind of hear you, Guy. It's a little bit low.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Okay. I will try to speak up.
I heard you talking about the article.
Okay.
Can you hear us now, Allison?
How is this,
yes,
Allison?
That seems better so far, yep.
Okay. And audience, this is your time to to chime in on, are we too loud, are we too quiet, what are you hearing? And chime in with the chats on Facebook and on YouTube. Okay? We rely on you because we have our equipment here, but, well, what's actually happening out there in the real world are often two different things.
That's right.
So you let us know. Allison, so I'm just going to give a quick explanation of what happened here. And then we'd invite your analysis, your comments, where you think it's going to go from here. As I wrote in today's Chronicle, a U.S. law governing vaccination in a public emergency protects a Windham County school district from a lawsuit, even though it administered a COVID-19 vaccination, aka experimental drug, to a student, a 6-year-old, without parental permission, with the parents expressly saying, no, we don't want this, and going over it over and again with the school, no, we don't want this, and them saying, yeah, that's fine. And even when the student himself told the person with the syringe, Dad said no, the student himself said, Dad said no. And the Supreme Court said, well, actually, the federal law says in a public emergency, there's total immunity from lawsuits. So, tough luck. Didn't use those words, tough luck, but that's the upshot of it. Allison, what do you make of this decision and of our current legal framework?
I know, it's really just a heartbreaking, devastating story. I mean, you've got these parents who, very specifically said, absolutely not. And then there's a mess up in the process at the school during the vaccination clinic, and they said there was a name tag that was wrong. But then, like you said, Guy, and I was so glad that you put this in your coverage, Dad said no. I mean, that's a red flag. That should be a red flag for everyone. Maybe we should make a phone call here. Maybe we should wait and see. I mean, we're talking about a drug. We're talking about an injection into a child's body, and we know there's real risk. We absolutely know that there is risk. So there's a lot to this story. I would say that the primary
Allison,
sort of
before we get into that analysis, I'm going to, because you brought it up about this process, I want to read, according to the lawsuit, what actually happened in that school. It says...
So, like going through the process?
Right. It said LP, in the lawsuit, it said LP, the boy's initials, was vaccinated on the day of the clinic. An unidentified worker removed LP from class and applied a handwritten label to LP's shirt that read LK and displayed LK's date of birth. LK was a 5-year-old student at Academy School who was not in LP's class. LK had already been vaccinated the same day. LP verbally protested, saying, Dad said no. Nonetheless, clinic workers gave LP a stuffed animal to distract him, told LP that he was, quote, a brave little boy, and administered 1 dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
That's so disgusting.
So that is what happened. And I'm sorry I sort of interrupted you, Allison, but I figured I would at least set the stage.
No, I think it's so important to understand, the process issue that happened there, and also to understand that that's actually what the lawsuit was about. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that this vaccine was given, because the PrEP Act offers full, complete immunity. It specifically was a negligence lawsuit. It very much so focused on the fact that they had their process messed up, and, that goes back to negligence, and that's what they were trying to sue on. And obviously they just used the PrEP Act as this, blanket immunity to say, we're not going to go there. We're not even looking at this. I'm not quite sure why the Vermont Supreme Court, didn't dig into it more, or isn't willing to understand how they're coming at this lawsuit and what the plaintiffs are asking for. And that's what's really so devastating, because I think fundamentally we get to the PrEP Act as a problem and Big Pharma's really protections that it has put in place for a situation like this. And this completely protects them and their products, and obviously anybody administering their products. and this has been since 2005. So, I mean, I don't know. I wonder. I hope that they will move forward to a district court and try to take it further. I don't know if it will be continually thrown away because of the PrEP Act, but I think it comes down to fundamentally we need to deal with the PrEP Act because we cannot have something like this go on. And at the heart of it, really what this destroys is informed consent. I mean, informed consent goes back to the Nuremberg Code in 1947, where a person very, very specifically needs to be made fully aware of the benefit-risk analysis. What are the risks that they are taking with this medical procedure or these medications? And that obviously was destroyed in this lawsuit, and also in this situation because, let's be honest, a 6-year-old, absolutely not, cannot make a benefit-risk analysis. And then if they've messed up their procedure with what the parents were specifically asking, I mean, that really should be on them. So there's been a lot of conversation and concern already about this lawsuit and what sort of legal precedent it's going to set. The other part of it, I would say, of concern, because I see sort of a trend moving this way at the public school, how much health care should a public school be doing? And that's a big thing that states really across the country are contending with in different ways as more medical procedures and medical support are offered at schools. And there is a real resistance to that. Schools are for education. They shouldn't be for, medical procedures or therapies. So it brings up that whole sort of piece as well. But on the whole, I would just say it's absolutely heartbreaking and devastating what the family is going through. We know that these are 100% experimental, genetic injections, and we don't know the real repercussions. What we do know is that Johnson & Johnson, J&J, and AstraZeneca are no longer available because of thrombosis and blood clots. We've been told these are safe and effective, and we know that's not the case. So we're kind of dealing with, I think, some really big fundamental issues right now, and removing the PrEP Act there is definitely action. Many people are trying to move that forward because of the blanket immunity that offers big pharma products.
So,
and if you don't mind me saying, sorry.
I forgot to ask you to tell the audience, you're sort of connected with a good active grassroots group. I want to say the Health Freedom Alliance. Do I have that anywhere close? I know you're very active in this. Could you tell us some about your background in this?
Oh yes. So Health Choice Vermont, I work closely with, and
That's
Vermont Stands Up, right? And I work closely with both of them. And really, Health Choice Vermont for many years now has been very actively involved in ensuring that health choice stays alive and well and protected in Vermont, and that parents can make these decisions for their children, and they have a right to choose and a right to refuse. And that really is the bottom line. And then Vermont Stands Up became very active around that, specifically with COVID-19 and what we saw rolling out with vaccine mandates or, experimental injection mandates really across the board. And obviously that's a larger conversation. But it goes back to the other last point I was going to say is just thinking about Representative Ballant and Senators Welsh and Sanders, and none of them are really stepping up to do anything about this. And I think that is what is so disheartening and really disappointing, that they're not taking action to really look into the risk and the harms that we've seen with the vaccine. And I would say prior to COVID-19, in my practice, I had just under 100 people that I work with who have been vaccine injured. Since COVID-19,
whoa. Let's hold on. First of all, your practice, and what is your practice? And tell us more about these 100 people.
Right, thank you. So I have a nutrition practice in St. Johnsbury. I have a Master's of Science in Clinical Human Nutrition, and I work very closely with people trying to prevent disease, and then also as people are seeking supports when there is something that presents for them related to health problems. And so I've always worked with vaccine injury for at least 25 years, and now since COVID-19, that number for me has really doubled, where I'm seeing tremendous vaccine injury, and no one's taking it up. And that's where it's just very upsetting. I remember Becca Ballant, when she first did her run for U.S. Rep, she had, plugged all over her campaign website that she was going to hold Big Pharma accountable, and, we're going to do the opioid, and we're going to make sure prices are good for medications, which are all good causes. But now she's blatantly ignoring the fact that there is injury and that this needs to be looked at. And twice she's held my hand and promised me that she would look at some of the research and read books. But then I saw her in a congressional meeting where she was interviewing Joe Lapido, the Surgeon General out of Florida, who had done research out of Florida on the myocarditis with COVID-19 vaccines, especially in young males. And she wouldn't even let him speak. So here you have this highly credentialed doctor who's stepping out against Big Pharma, saying, look at this damage, look at this injury. And she was just trying to shred him, and she wouldn't let him talk. And she was referencing Politico, articles versus really hearing what this man has to say. And we all know Big Pharma has tons of money for lobbying and for advertising, but they've also put in place protections for themselves where they cannot be held liable. And this is where the Vaccine Injury Act of 1986 that Reagan signed into place, if you sue Big Pharma for a vaccine injury, you sue the Department of Justice. So they have taken it upon themselves through legislation that Department of Justice is going to defend the safety of the vaccines that they produce, which basically has resulted in, the one last thought on that, I'm so sorry,
Sure.
That has resulted in horrible clinical research and trials on these vaccines because they have no liability. So I'll stop there. There's obviously a lot to say about it, but it trumps all of that.
And haven't we seen in Vermont that the legislature gave the power of protection from immunity to some of the abortion industry, and also gave the explicit power of lawsuit, the strong deprivation of immunity against the fuel dealers. But the story that you wrote, it's sort of like they're using this power of the suit, either encouraging it or taking it away for the things that they support or the things that they oppose. Paul, I think you've probably been trying to get a word or two in edgewise.
No, hey, listen, I'm happy to just listen. I mean, Allison, she knows her stuff, and that's why we asked her to call in today. However, we do have some comments. I am not dying to get a word in. Some people have some comments.
That's great.
Kevin Ryan, Mouth Almighty, writes, aren't all government officials generally given immunity, but that might not be a good standard. Thank you, Kevin, for your comment. We always appreciate it. Turt Nelson writes, Vermont Supreme Court always takes the easy way out, and I guess that is seeming to be the case. You want to stay on that one for a second, Guy?
I do. The very last thing of note that they said in their court decision, they said, however, the state's, as I wrote, the state's high court did not lay claim to ruling on the full extent of the PrEP Act preemption. They said, quote, plaintiffs' arguments about preemption are misplaced. And therefore, this is the important part, therefore, we need not decide today the extent of the PrEP Act's preemptive effect. That's probably what Tur is talking about, that they basically, for better or for worse, kind of bailed on how far does this PrEP Act go? How far does the preemption of state law go? And that's where I think, and Allison, I'd love to get your feedback on this, is that...
It just cut me off, so I'm just calling back in.
Yeah, the phone cut out for a second.
Okay. So
yes,
basically, I was just
sorry.
saying...
I didn't hear that last quote said on the court ruling.
Right. So basically, the court said, because the plaintiff's arguments about preemption are misplaced, we need not decide today the extent of the PrEP Act's preemptive effect. So the Vermont Supreme Court said, we're just not touching the whole question of how far this PrEP Act can go, which makes me think that perhaps they left the door open for the ultimate arbiter of federal law, which are, as I think you just alluded to, the federal courts and the U.S. Supreme Court. Because the state court can't say, we find the federal law unconstitutional. You can't do that. That's what preemption is all about. But a federal court can. A federal court can say, this law goes too far, or this application of the law goes too far, and it needs to change. So I've got to wonder that if these people press their case, the couple that took this to the limit in Vermont, and presumably they could have settled. Who knows? Don't know. Maybe they were offered a settlement. They clearly didn't take it because they took it all the way to the Vermont Supreme Court. And it makes you wonder if there's someone out there who's going to come alongside and say, you've got a good case. We want to take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Once again, the intersection of Vermont and Vermont people and Vermont schools.
And Allison, I just want to say, if this goes to the Supreme Court, I think you and I are going to have to go down there and report on it.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. This is really important stuff.
Yes,
this is where, and it goes back to, Guy, what you were exactly talking about, where you have industry using the legislature to really protect themselves at the expense of the people. And it is obviously a pattern that we're witnessing in Vermont and also nationally. And there's a lot of money, a lot of lobbyists, and a lot of money, and a lot of industry, fighting, to step obviously steps, especially in the pharma, which is their history.
So you're kind of blipping in and out a little bit, Allison. I do want to talk to one thing. You mentioned Becca Ballant. Yes, she did make a lot of great. Hey, we want to get to the bottom of all this research and everything about vaccines and vaccine transparency. That happened. She made that statement one day after a $1 million, I think it was $1 million. Payment, a seven-figure anyway, payment from a PAC associated with a cryptocurrency firm. Friedman, the guy who was disgraced, made a huge contribution, and one of the provisions of that PAC is we want to get to the bottom of vaccine transparency. And literally that quote from their website was lifted and put onto Ballant's campaign website. And after, a week later, he's in total disgrace. He's probably in manacles. And suddenly, there's not an awful lot of interest and ever since then, from Becca Ballant on getting to the bottom of vaccine transparency. So, I'm curious.
I've seen no action there at all, right?
Really? Now, and the other thing is, you mentioned these vaccine injuries. Would you mind telling us a bit? Obviously, you can't give away any personal information, but would you mind telling us the nature of some of these vaccine injuries?
Primarily what I see are autoimmune diseases and neurological. And that's where in the research, that's absolutely what the patterns are, and that's also clinically what I'm seeing. Antibodies, passing all of your innate immunity, all mucous membranes, all that your body would try to react to something foreign or infectious. Go right into the blood. You trigger antibodies. They try to detect if something's effective. There's efficacy by looking at neutralizing antibodies, but those antibodies then have the capacity to attack your own tissue. And this is where you get into the risk with autoimmune conditions and the neurological piece. And I also do closely somewhat more local neurologist who's very tuned into this and seeing it.
Allison, are you on your speaker? Or I wonder, because you're still kind of crackling in and out a bit on us here.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that better?
That's a lot better, yeah.
Okay. My apologies. I don't know if I should repeat that or not. I'm sorry.
Maybe the last couple sentences.
The last couple sentences, basically just talking about these neutralizing antibodies is then what is has the capacity to trigger the autoimmune conditions. And there is a network of some healthcare providers. There's a neurologist locally who is aware of this. But unfortunately, you're at the situation where there's nurse practitioners, doctors, specialists who can't come out and talk about it openly.
Why not?
They are concerned for their jobs. They are concerned for their reputation. So, it doesn't get spoken about in the way that it really needs to happen.
Wow. Okay.
So we do have a couple more comments, and Allison, we want to thank you so much for calling in. Rob Williams is going to call in just a minute here, so I do want to just get to that. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much, and have a great Friday, and thanks for having the real conversations, Guy and Paul. We really appreciate it.
You know we love to do it. Thank you so much. We always appreciate hearing from you. However,
all right, take care.
You too. Let's hear from some of the comments here. We have Kevin Ryan. He writes, the Nuremberg Code is not ratified by the United States, unfortunately. Wendy Bailey writes, every person in the world was denied informed consent. Man, what a statement. That is
I know.
So very true.
So very true. I know.
And Jerry Zeller writes, were there any kids that didn't get the shot that day in school? We don't know. Not really sure. And
there was one point I meant to bring up, is that the school administrator expressed to the parent that they were kind of unhappy that they didn't really get enough parental buy-in as much as they were hoping for.
Good. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
People did their research.
I guess so. And, and it's one of those things that technically this thing, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this was never totally approved. It was an emergency use, rather quickly run through. Hey, Allison, that is Dr.
Yes.
Rob Williams calling in.
We're going to take his call.
You guys take care. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Rob, you're live on Friday at 4 with Guy Page and Paul Bean. How are you today? Can you hear us, Rob?
Hello, Paul. I can hear you.
Can you hear us? You are live with Guy Page and Paul Bean on Friday at 4. How are you today?
Fantastic. How you guys, Guy and Paul?
Hey, doing good. Hey, I don't know if there's any way. I don't know if you're on speaker or whatever. You sound like you're sort of at the bottom of Niagara Falls right now. Rob, are you at the bottom?
That?
That's much better. Much better.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, I will be brief, gentlemen, because I know you have an active show going on there. I really appreciated Allison's extended comments and insights. She is, of course, on point on this. And the only thing I would add, if I may.
Sure.
I think Vermonters who were able to see past the fear and the propaganda around the COVID situation were growing increasingly alarmed at the CDC's own data around injection injuries and deaths as the months went on. We know from the Center for Disease Control itself, that's the CDC, that tens of thousands of claims regarding wrongful injection-related deaths were filed in the months after these injections were rolled out. We know from the CDC's own data that hundreds of thousands of claims for injection-related injuries were filed all over the country. And Vermonters who were watching CDC data, seeing these mounting reports of injuries and deaths, quite rightly decided perhaps not to engage with these injections. And to see the Supreme Court rule on the side of the PrEP Act, and oh, by the way, the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which predates the PrEP Act by several decades.
Oh,
so
wow.
Big Pharma is actually doubly legally indemnified and immune from legal action on the part of families and communities, is really quite grotesque. I don't really have another word to describe it. So, and solutions, before I hang up, constitutionally, legally speaking, the state of Vermont could enact through legislative action a piece of legislation that would nullify the PrEP Act within state borders in Vermont, thus returning pro-life and pro-choice control back to the citizens of Vermont. That's highly, and in terms of legal precedent, that's highly an option here. So I'll hang up and appreciate you covering this really important issue.
Hey, Rob, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate your comments, and it really is quite something, just the layers in which the pharmaceutical industry is protected by law to do the things that they do, and how they get away with it. And this really might be one example for us here in Vermont, where we might actually get some ground on the pharmaceutical industry. And I can't help but to wonder, like you said, Guy, if there is an organization out there or a group or some really wealthy person who's going to say, man, we got to take this thing to the next level. And I don't know, I guess kind of where I'm going with that is what are your thoughts on that, Guy? Do you think that's a potential or?
Absolutely.
And what would that look like, I guess? Because I have no idea. I've never followed something like this closely.
Yeah. I think that there are organizations like Robert F. Kennedy's
That's right.
organization. They've, if there's ever a lawyer who was not afraid to take on the big dogs, it's Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a history of that. And he has a very long history, including in Vermont, of showing up and saying, these vax mandates are not a good idea. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone like him or others decided that it's time to take on Big Pharma. And that's who this really is. When we talked to General Flynn and to Mark Serrano last week, both of them made really clear that there is, in Washington, D.C., there is the military-industrial complex, is what Mark Serrano called the censorship industrial complex.
Right.
Senator Mike Lee this week was on, I believe, on Tucker Carlson show, and he said that the way that they do this is they get a big money defense spending thing, and then a big sort of social plan, and they put it in the same bill, so that it takes the very rare senator who is going to buck his own people, his own voters, to say, I'm sorry I couldn't vote for that defense bill, or I'm sorry I couldn't vote for this other bill because of how they built this. So it's almost a manipulative system. And that's one of the reasons we are spending so much money on so many things, is because Congress has a hard time saying no.
So, Guy, we do have a couple comments. However, I just want to quickly show, if you want to call in and join the conversation, I have the phone number 802-793-8479. It's shown there on the screen. We're willing to take your call with any comments, concerns, questions. If you want to just air frustration, that's okay too. Maybe don't be a little too crazy with it. But if you want to join us, you can do that. And I'll just say the number again, just in case you're only able to listen to us. It's 802-793-8479. That being said, we do have one comment from Kevin Ryan, Mouth Almighty. He writes, the United States Common Rules essentially requires information consent under the HHS. What is the HHS, Guy?
Health and Human Services.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but I don't know. He also wrote, the fault does not lie with Big Pharma, but in the politicians who enact mandates. And that is...
I think that might be a little naive, Kevin. Sorry to call you out, but Big Pharma's got so much money, and they are so feared. Yes, ultimately you're right. It is the legislators who do the yay or the nay. But in a city where Big Pharma has got just gazillions of dollars and spends it very freely on lobbyists, on advertising, on PACs that will take you out if you vote the wrong way, hard to say no. But you're right, Kevin. They should. Yeah.
Well, Guy, we're not receiving any more comments.
Okay.
We're not receiving any calls as of right now.
All right.
However, I guess I can't help but to wonder, if there's anyone out there who has a connection with the people, the families involved, maybe even directly connection to the situation as a whole. If you are, reach out to us. If you want to be involved in maybe an interview of some sort or a conversation. And apparently we do have a phone call, and it looks like it's coming from Mouth Almighty himself. Okay. So let's take the call here. Good afternoon. You're live with Guy and Paul.
Hey, Paul. It's Kevin Ryan.
Hey, Kevin. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I hope you're well. I just wanted to follow up with the mandates. The funny thing is, medically, when the doctors cure grandma's cancer, we love them. When they leave the knife inside grandma, we don't like them so much. So it gets very easy to blame. That's my point. We know people were injured. I was injured, but I wound up with long COVID. A medical practitioner didn't follow correct procedures. I got COVID. It knocked me out for years.
Wow.
But I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across.
Right. Did that make you want to, like, hey, I've been done wrong here and I want to sue, or are you just saying, hey, stuff happens, or what was your take on that, Kevin?
No, again, it's was an emergency in place, and there's a tremendous immunity for any health practitioner that is trying their best, and that's kind of what we do. My parents were both emergency medical technicians. They answered hundreds and hundreds of ambulance calls, and so they were largely immunized under Good Samaritan laws, because if they pulled you out of a car wreck, maybe a mistake was made. Hopefully not. But it's very easy to say, oh, so-and-so did me a wrong song, so I'm going to clobber him. And that's where I think we need to be a little bit more judicious, or a little rather than litigious, if I may.
Yeah, it's a good point. And yet, how about the EMT who says, I'm just going to, I want to get back to the ball game. I'm just going to pull this person out by their neck because they can't sue me anyway.
I think there's something to be said for gross negligence,
right.
And I'm not sure that was here at the time. I mean, you lived through the COVID situation as well as I did, and people were in a blind panic. We couldn't go to work. We couldn't shop in stores. The news every night was hundreds and hundreds of stories of people, passing away, tragedies, and we wanted something done. And the first person to show up with a miracle cure, we gave them all the leash they needed.
Mm-hmm. That's true. As a nation, we were united behind get us that vaccine. And the understanding was this is going to be a good, solid vaccine, because that's what they always have been, right? And they'll get it right. But then there was a thought, maybe not so much.
If I could,
Guy, I'll tell you, I didn't go anywhere near it. I said, nope.
Yeah.
Well, I will push back a little bit and say, we're talking about a 6-year-old at a school, though. Just in terms.
Okay, sorry to cut you off, Paul. That's a specific case, and I think I can't see a teacher. No, maybe I can, saying, "Oh, we're going to give all the kids a vaccine, no matter what the parents think." Maybe that happened, but I doubt it. This sounds like they mislabeled the kid. He tried to say, no, my parents don't want this. They screwed up.
Yeah.
What can you do? When you're in that kind of situation, do you or don't you?
And what I remember also about that is the great difficulty they had finding any school employees at all, any school workers. So there was already, these people were totally jammed up and understaffed, and perhaps more likely that something like that's going to happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for calling. We greatly appreciate it. We hope to hear from all of you. That's what this show is all about, giving the people a voice. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Paul, for having me as usual.
Absolutely. There goes Kevin. Guy, there are some comments on the page, on the Facebook page, some of the things that people have written about this story. Bobby Johnson writes, abomination, the government is not our mother and father. That's a good point. That's one of these things where, that's where that's why I'm so, when I just said my point to him, it's like, well, we're talking about a 6-year-old in a school. Sure, they made a mistake, but is that necessarily justified? I mean, I just think it's, yeah, sure, Guy. What's your take on it?
Well, Bobby, I'd say they may not be our mother and our father, but maybe they're our big brother. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but good point. And they're not. And, this is not an isolated thing where the schools in particular are stepping into the parental realm. Just passed a law this year. Parents have no right to know what their kids read in the library and what they look at in library computers over the age of 12. No parental consent or even notification for abortion. A lot of trans information and treatments, again, same thing. And the trend is always towards less for the parents, more control and information for the schools and for government. This can be seen, I think, as part of that. Any other comments there?
Yeah, there's quite a few on the page. Some of them I don't think I should read.
Yeah, then don't.
I'm pretty good at discerning these days.
Yes.
However, this is what Amy Lorraine writes. She writes, needs to go to the United States Supreme Court. This is yet another reason why I homeschool. And, this is another instance where the homeschooling crowd is seemingly, in my opinion, a growing force of nature that's saying, you know what, the government is not my mother and father, and for that matter, the mother and father of my children, so I'm going to take care of this problem myself and start educating them myself, medicating them myself, and doing as much as I can through my own means rather than depending on a larger system and structure that really doesn't always seem to have the best interests, if you will, of the will of the people.
Vermont's homeschooling community grew a lot during COVID, and once the schools opened back up again, it did shrink some, but still way above the pre-COVID levels. So and it's not just about COVID, it's about a lot of things. So if you're good point, Amy. And if anyone's interested in homeschooling, there are homeschooling networks and people with great information. In fact, believe it or not, the state of Vermont has actually made it easier to homeschool, to file homeschool reports than it did a year or two ago. So, yeah, what else we got?
Got one more comment. Danny McFarland writes, that school principal and staff knew what they were doing. This is why we keep our kids out of school on mobile dental days and when they are doing vaccine clinics. Every paper I sound for school states no vaccines may be given under any circumstance and is copied and kept on file for later. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, 100% the school and staff knew what they were doing, but, this does, when you go back to the COVID times and how folks were treated that did not want to take the vaccines, you were very much dehumanized and treated as if you were actually the problem. I mean, we had your own governor saying that the 5% of people in the state that were not vaccinated were the problem. And there was not just him saying that, but there was state officials and government officials all over the country, also within the universities. I had some of this experience myself.
Tell us about your experience at UVM.
Yeah, I mean, so when I came out of college in 2020, of course, the vaccine itself was just starting to get rolled out, if you will. And there was some people that I knew at that time who had taken it in late 2021 or beginning of 2021. They were really pushing it. And at that time, everybody had to take COVID tests, of course, while you were coming through, if you were going to be on campus for any reason, right? So I went through a situation at the UVM where all my classes were online except for one class. And they wanted me to go to campus twice a week to test for COVID, even though I only had to go to campus once a week to begin with. So in total, then I would be going to campus 3 times. So if you do the crazy COVID logic, which they made up as they went, then I shouldn't have been around all those people 3 times a week when I didn't have to be. But they thought it was more important that I was to be tested. And so I was threatened with being kicked out of school and having to come back for another semester. And they tried to make it so I couldn't go through graduation and all this crazy stuff. And I fought it, and I fought it hard. And then even the next year, my girlfriend at the time, she played lacrosse for UVM. She didn't want to take the vaccine. And she fought it. She fought it really hard, and she got through, although she was the only one that had to wear a mask during practice. So everybody else knew, there's the crazy freak girl that doesn't want to take the vaccine. Look at her, she's so weird. Although nobody actually really felt that way. They liked her. And actually, a lot of them really admired her ability to say no. So I think where I'm going with all of this is it does seem to me that there was a potential that the school just did what they wanted to because they thought they were justified by whatever the mainstream talking points were at the time. That's what it was like. I mean, you remember, Guy, people were talking about us like we were like I don't even know what's a good comparison. I don't want to say anything offensive, but
stupid fools.
Yeah, well, stupid fools, but I would say even worse, like as if we were not even human in some ways, like
cruel, stupid fools.
Yeah, like evil and enemies and it was just the terminology. It was very nasty propaganda that was being spread. So, and by the way, I want to point out too, when you fight this stuff, because we are right about it. I mean, that's how I think when you fight for this stuff and you fight hard, you will be rewarded, and not just rewarded, but proven in the long term right. So I hope that this goes to the Supreme Court, and I can promise if it does, I will be in Washington, D.C. Reporting on this, because this is one of the most meaningful issues to me, And once again, like you said, Guy, another national issue, or at least maybe a potential connection to Vermont and the national issues. So sorry for my rant, folks, but man,
that's a pretty cool rant. Thanks. Yeah, my father at one point was the youngest lawyer ever to argue a case before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
A million years ago, 1956 or something like that.
Holy cow.
But anyway, so that's pretty cool. I hope you do go. What I remember is being made to feel like a dummy was ivermectin. Ivermectin is this alternative, safe, anti-COVID drug, and over again, our health department and everyone said, this is just horse medicine. This is just a veterinarian drug. And so I was starting to think, maybe the Allison Despothes of the world are maybe not quite right on this. And then I did a tiny bit, like an inch deep research into ivermectin. And lo and behold, ivermectin won the Nobel Prize for its use for humans as an antiviral. And in fact, if you're an immigrant to the United States, like from the Middle East, it is required, if you're moving here legally, to take ivermectin as a anti, sort of an antiviral, anti-worm kind of thing.
Dewormer.
Yeah. It's I'm not sure that's the exact.
Well, that's what they said. It was horse dewormer.
Yeah.
Which it is used for.
Yeah.
However,
it is.
There's uses
but
for
it. But like so many medicines, it has parallel off-label uses. Yeah. But for some reason, oh my, Nobel Prize for human use. Oh no, we can't even think about using that.
Tur Nelson just wrote into the comments, the propaganda continues, ... YouTube just put a COVID-19 vaccine link on your live cast page. That is incredible, honestly. That is incredible. Always being watched by Big Brother.
You know my rule here where no one can use any profanity.
Don't do it, Guy.
I won't.
Don't do it. That's funny.
Anyway. Oh, darn. Okay, I said it.
There you go. No, Guy.
Yeah. Whoa. All right.
Well, there's one more comment I think we should read, and maybe we should wrap it up.
Yep.
Jerry Zeller writes, I loved it when the one saying you were the problem got the COVID with the shot. And you know something? I just want to tell folks out there, I never took a COVID vaccine, not a single one. And I've never had COVID, and I'm not even going to knock on wood because I don't need to. I'm never going to get it. And that's just because what it comes down to, this COVID stuff, and by the way, I took a lot of tests, like I had explained before. They made me test twice a week for a long time. I'm telling you, this COVID stuff, man, got to be careful with it. Got to be careful with it. I won't say much more, but Guy.
Well, great show, Paul. You're kind of coming out of your shell. Not that you had much of a shell to begin with, but you're really out of your shell now.
Well,
and I love it. It was great.
This is one I care a lot about.
Yeah, that's right. So we hope next week, by the way. So Paul and I were like, the flood or this?
Yes.
The flood or the Supreme Court? We finally decided, okay, the Supreme Court. So next week, it is our hope that we will have a top-level official from the state of Vermont dealing with what is the state going to do long-term to prevent more catastrophic flood damage. Because this is, I believe, now the fourth major flood, at least the fourth major flood in 13 months. Are we looking at Vermont now has a monsoon season, as one of my Facebook friends said. And so what's up with this? So we are going to try to find out. You can read on today's Chronicle. I wrote a story on here are all the things that we know of Vermont is doing, is planning to do, and is not planning to do. And so that would be, I think, informative reading for anyone who wants to know about what the state's planning to do with the flood. But until next week, probably it might be one of our new Tuesday at 2s to go along with our Friday at 4s. We don't know.
It does seem like we're going to have somebody in the works to make that happen.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
100% certain.
Good.
However, before we shut this down, I just want to say quickly, if you haven't liked our page, you haven't subscribed, you're not following us, please click the follow buttons, click the subscribe button, repost, share our page. Anything that you can do. These are all free options, by the way, to support the Vermont Daily Chronicle and what we're doing here with Creemee Cast. This is one easy way to do it, but if you want to become a sustaining subscriber, you can check that out on the page, on the Vermont Daily Chronicle page. It's $9 a month. I mean, come on,
That's
folks. Right. That's one very easy way you can support your First Amendment right and what we're doing here with the Vermont Daily Chronicle. And one more thing I want to throw out there. I have ordered a handful more of these hats.
Good.
I've got a bucket of them on the way, if you will, and I'm selling them for let's see, $35 a piece. Well, $35 if they're shipping. If they need to be shipped, it's going to be $35, but if not, $30. So if you want to reach out to me, you can reach me on social media. You can also reach out to Guy. You can comment here. We'll monitor. So reach out to us any way you can. One very cool way, if you will, you can support us too. So thanks so much, everyone. Guy, do you have anything else you want to add?
Sure. Can we see this? 4 o'clock, or actually, are you going to be doing the Creemees tonight, Paul?
I am going to be doing right now, as soon as we get off.
If I had one in my hand, I'd slurp it in front of you to motivate you. But Paul's Creemees are awesome. You really need to come down to the Northfield Old Beaton Chevrolet building and grab a Creemee from Paul.
Hat says Creemee Cast, heavy cream. It's the logo for the show, folks, for the Creemee Cast show. So if you want to buy one, I have a great sponsor and supporter, somebody who's been watching us down in Florida, actually, of all places, and he's moving to Vermont.
All right.
He's getting married, and he's doing his life dream to come up here and live here in his home state. So, hey, man, that to me, how inspiring is that guy?
Buying the high ground.
That's right. That's right. Good point.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We will talk to you next week. Really appreciate your listening and your contributing and your speaking and your writing and everything. Allison, Rob, everyone.